Hey friends! Okay, so this is a YouTube video that I decided to do because I wanted to clear up some misconceptions about performance of browser-side databases. So I'm Nolan Lawson, I work on Couchdb, and I've contributed to LocalStorage, and I've worked a lot with these in-browser database APIs, LocalStorage, WebSQL, IndexedDB a lot over the past few years. So I wanted to do a little experiment to see how these browser APIs, these browser databases actually perform when you're actually using them in your website. Because, a lot of people are kind of obsessed with performance numbers when it comes to these things. They want to know how many operations per second can this do, or which one's faster than this other one. And I mean, that is an important question, but there are more questions than that to ask when you're choosing a database. Whether a database is in memory or not will have performance implications. It will come with its own trade-offs. How is it actually storing data under the hood? Is it using local storage, IndexedDB, or WebSQL, or some combination of the three? Anyway, so for this talk, I'm going to talk about one kind of trade-off, and this is a really interesting one. This is about DOM blocking. So this is really interesting because when you're using databases on the client side, one super crucial aspect is that it is running on the user's computer, right? So if you're doing, I don't know, if you're not very clever about the way you're using the database, then you can accidentally introduce code that is too expensive that runs on the UI thread and that blocks DOM operations. So let me show you what this actually looks like. So this is the test I put together. I call it Browser Database Comparison. It's a really catchy title. It just gives you a lot of different ways to test a bunch of different APIs. We've got some standard DOM APIs here, like local storage, IndexedDB, WebSQL, and then some in-memory operations. You can see what impact they have on the performance of the app. This is just a little animated GIF. Is Kirby dancing, because I love Kirby. I put Kirby in everything I do. And what you can do is, if you test this thing out, you can see how it's possible to get Kirby to stop moving. And this is the kind of thing that in your app, users are going to interpret as jank or slowdown or jitteriness. Right? If I'm doing lots of operations, like watch this, I can easily get Kirby to just totally stop moving, right? This is what you don't want in your app, right? Because this isn't just animated GIFs, this is anything you're doing with the DOM, all right? This is, adding elements, removing elements, changing elements, doing JavaScript animations, anything except for high performance GPU accelerated CSS animations are gonna show this kind of jankiness, right? So you can see the code that I'm using for this. It's super simple. All right, this is totally open source, and I have a link in the video. So you go ahead and look at how I implemented this. What this is doing is this is just inserting a certain number of documents, which in this case a document is just a very simple object. Right, it's just an object with a data attribute and math.random, just a little object. For the test that I just showed you, that was an in-memory test with a regular object, right? Regular object, where I inserted 100,000 documents. And what that looks like, it's very simple. This is the code. Let's see if we can zoom in. Oops. I always do that. Zoom. Yeah. So this is the code. It's really simple, right? I've just got an object, and I'm iterating through, and I'm giving it a key and assigning that to a document. And just that alone is enough to block the DOM if you're doing it heavy enough. So that's in memory, right? That's because that's in JavaScript. Whatever you do in JavaScript synchronously blocks the DOM because the DOM is also synchronous. So this shows up in any in-memory usage of a database, like any in-memory database, like memdown or AllaSQL or Loki.js, like all these things are in memory, and so they'll do this. You can see this with Loki as well. Like I've got a test here with Loki, and let's try 1,000. Okay, that didn't block it very much. Let's do 10,000. Still not very much. 100,000. Okay, there you can finally start to see Kirby slow down a bit. So, I mean, that's the trade-off with in-memory, right? Is that it is super, super fast, right? But it can block the DOM. So you want to be careful with how much you're using it or where you're using it, or maybe, don't use it a whole bunch in one little block. Break it up a little bit. So that's in memory. So local storage. All right, local storage is really interesting because local storage is also synchronous, but it's not purely in memory, right? It is reading and writing to disk. So let's see how this thing operates. I'm going to show you the code real quick. So the code is not going to surprise anybody, right? It looks almost exactly like the regular object test, right? This is it. Right, I'm just using the global local storage object. Really, really simple. So let's see what this looks like in Firefox. I'm going to insert 1,000 elements. Okay, that wasn't so bad. I didn't see Kirby stop dancing at any point. Let's try 10,000. Oof. Oh, you're not moving like you used to. Okay, so it's still not so bad, right? Then we get up to 100,000, and Kirby is just frozen in place. And notice it finished. Like the look at that. Local storage API actually got back to me and said 2,000 milliseconds, but the Kirby was frozen well after that. Like, let's do it again. See? That seems better now. Must have buffered in a memory or something. Let's try Chrome. Do the same thing. Let's do 1,000 with local storage. Go. And of course, Kirby is totally blocked. This is taking a long time, Chrome. This is not good. And see, it's done now, but Kirby's still blocked. There we go. Now we're back. So this is like the number one reason why you would not want to use local storage, right? Is if you're doing really, really heavy operations, then local storage can block the DOM. If you're just like, adding a key value like here and there, like 2 or 3, like it's not going to make a difference. Even 1,000, look, doesn't make a difference. Well, a little bit. You can kind of see that. But like, local storage is fine for very small use cases. Like you don't want to insert a lot of data into it. And this shows up in all the browsers. You can see this in Edge. So I've got Edge here running on Windows 10. So let's try this out as well. I think I've got it running here. Yeah, okay. So let's try, let's do local storage with 1,000. Okay, even that blocked it pretty bad, actually. How about 10,000? That's pretty awful. And actually, oh, that's bad. We're getting the little spinny thing. And I'm not going to try 100,000 in this browser because I actually got Edge to crash before when I was doing that. So again, this is another good reason to be very careful with local storage. And while we're speaking of browsers crashing, let's move on to Safari. This is WebKit Nightly. So we're going to do some local storage stuff here. Now this is really interesting because this is the one browser that I tested that the DOM does not get blocked at all when I'm using local storage. Look at this. But on the other hand, if I keep using it heavily, watch what happens. Oh my god. Yeah, this is what happens. You get this beach ball of doom, and then you have to just close the page. The page, you can't do anything with it. It's dead. This is actually a bug that I filed on Safari, so hopefully it'll be fixed at some point. But yeah, this is another reason to be very, very careful with local storage, right? I have to just totally kill this page. So let's do that. Oh man. Oh, this is bad. Okay, there we go. Okay, and we're back. Okay, so that's local storage, right? Now there's also WebSQL, right? And WebSQL is only in Safari and Chrome, but you can use it, and a lot of the open source browser libraries will use it. Like Couchdb uses it, LocalStorage uses it, YDNDB uses it. If you're using the IndexedDB shim, that's over WebSQL. So WebSQL is asynchronous, and it's not supposed to block the DOM, right? This is supposed to be a big advantage of using it over something like local storage, is that it's asynchronous, so it shouldn't block the DOM. But I have a simple test here, and well, let's test it on Safari's first. So Safari performs really admirably with this. When you test it out, not even a blip, right? Kirby keeps dancing. Actually, it doesn't matter how much you insert. Let's insert 100,000. Well, actually, Kirby did block a bit. Oh, it's this thing. Yeah, this is the dreaded pop-up in Safari. So there's that to deal with as well. Yeah, well, let's not insert that much data. Eh? Let's just try to keep it down. Let's see if we can block Kirby. So we cannot block Kirby. So so Safari is doing the right thing here. Safari is running all these WebSQL operations in the background, not blocking the DOM. Let's try Chrome. So Chrome, sadly, when we tried WebSQL, the first thing you're going to notice when I start inserting a lot I could have sworn I had this blocking yesterday. There we go. So it blocks a little bit. Yeah, it's kind of chunky, right? Kirby kind of stopped in his tracks for a second there. So it's mostly asynchronous, though. It's not too bad. So that's WebSQL. You also notice it's really, really fast, right? Yeah, so that's WebSQL. Let's move on to IndexedDB. So this is where, in my opinion, it gets really sad. Let's start off with Safari because I find this kind of interesting. I actually managed to write an IndexedDB test that will work in Safari. Safari has horrible support for IndexedDB. Actually, IE does as well. Basically, it's just Chrome and Firefox that have decent decent support for IndexedDB. I mean, I can show you right here. Like, let's do. Right, really not great support across the board in a lot of different browsers, sadly. But you know what? Let's try it out in Safari first. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. And actually, let's start low. Let's start at 1,000. Okay, so Kirby wasn't blocked at all. That was great. Let's up it to 10,000. Still not blocked, but it's taking a really long time. You see, compare this, right? Like this is actually the one of the saddest things I noticed when I was testing this out is that IndexedDB does not block at all in Safari. That's great. That's beautiful. That's how it should be done. But it is so much slower than WebSQL, and it's slower for a kind of operation that IndexedDB should be good at, right? This is like what I'm storing in here. You can look at the code. What I'm storing is just key value pairs, where the value is just regular JSON objects. So in IndexedDB, IndexedDB is so verbose. So here's the IndexedDB code, right? So I'm just storing an object. I've got a key path on ID. So I just store an object with ID equal to the string, and then I look it up based on that. Or actually, there's no lookups in this particular code, but I'm assuming that at some point you will want to look it up by some kind of primary key. So that's that IndexedDB code. This is like the main use case for IndexedDB, right, is something like this. And then in WebSQL, it's kind of silly because I just have a table with two fields, a string ID and a string JSON, where I just JSON stringified and put it in. And yet, look at the performance difference. So that was 10,000 that I put into IndexedDB. It took 17 milliseconds in Safari. Let's try WebSQL with 10,000. 17 milliseconds, or 17 seconds, keep that in your head. 17. 250 milliseconds. It's several orders of magnitude faster. Crazy how much faster it is. I mean, obviously in memory is going to be even faster than that, right? So 10,000, 16 milliseconds, so another order of magnitude. Loki should be equally fast, yeah. So that's really sad. So let's see how Chrome performs. We're going to do the same test. So let's keep it reasonable. Let's look at 10,000. So we're going to do 10,000 with WebSQL. So you'll recall the WebSQL blocked a little bit. It's not blocking so much now. It seems to be based on how much you insert. 500 milliseconds, not so bad. Switch over to IndexedDB, 10,000. Oh, Kirby can't keep up. And look, it took 865 milliseconds. So see that again. All right, 10,000 in IndexedDB, 850 milliseconds. WebSQL, 400. So this is pretty consistent with a lot of what I've seen with WebSQL and IndexedDB and Chrome over the past few years, which is that WebSQL is about twice as fast for most stuff, even the stuff that IndexedDB is supposed to be good at. It's really sad. For read operations, WebSQL can be even faster. I've seen up to 40x for certain operations, just because it depends on what you're trying to do with WebSQL. But WebSQL tends to be more flexible than IndexedDB, so this is kind of disheartening to see. But more importantly for the purposes of this video is that, check it out, it blocks the DOM like crazy. Actually, WebSQL blocks the DOM way less, right? Let's do IndexedDB again. 10,000, Kirby stops dead in his tracks. WebSQL, 10,000, it's not so bad. I didn't even see any dropped frames. I only see dropped frames when I do 100,000 with WebSQL. I don't even know if I dare to do 100,000 with IndexedDB. Well, let's try it out. It can't take longer than 8 seconds, right? So let's do it. 100,000 IndexedDB, go. Alright, yeah, so about 10 seconds. Yep, so that's IndexedDB in Chrome. It is totally blocking the DOM. This is not supposed to happen. This is supposed to be one of the reasons that we're all supposed to hop on the IndexedDB bandwagon and stop using LocalStorage, right? It's because LocalStorage blocks the DOM and IndexedDB doesn't, supposedly. But here it is in Chrome blocking the DOM. Now that said, in Safari it doesn't block the DOM, and I will show you that in Edge as well, to their credit, it also doesn't block the DOM. So we're going to do IndexedDB is do 1,000 operations, insert, not blocking at all. 10,000, Well, that actually, yeah, there was a little hiccup there. But for the most part, Kirby's dancing. He's not doing too bad. So, yeah, so kudos to Microsoft and to Apple. Your IndexedDB implementation does not block the DOM. I cannot say the same for Chrome. I cannot say the same for Firefox. Let's go check out Firefox. Let's do IndexedDB. Let's do 1000. Let's insert. And okay, that wasn't bad. 1000 was okay. But now let's do 10,000. Oh, that's bad. Yeah. So interestingly, Firefox IndexedDB for me recently has been running a bit faster than Chrome IndexedDB. I'm told by Dale Harvey, who works at Mozilla, that it's probably due to the recent SQLite speedups because Mozilla implemented IndexedDB on top of SQLite. So I've seen it get a lot faster over the past couple of years. It used to be like twice as slow as Chrome, but now it's a bit faster, in fact. So, and that seems to be due to the SQLite speedup. So that's really cool. But anyway, but it is blocking. It is blocking like crazy. So that's really unfortunate. So these are both bugs that I actually just recently filed on Firefox and on Chrome. There's no reason that IndexedDB should block. This is like the thing. This is like the selling point of IndexedDB, right? Is like, stop using LocalStorage, use IndexedDB because it does all the same things but better, faster, in the background. Doesn't block the DOM, doesn't block your web page, but it does in Firefox and Chrome. So that's disappointing. There is a way around it though, and the way around it is just to use a web worker. So web workers are super interesting because in every browser that I tested, IndexedDB is the only storage mechanism that's supported. Okay, so you can try, for instance, you could try local storage in a web worker, and you'll see, right, the local storage is not defined. It's not in there. Try WebSQL. Yeah, let's try it in Chrome, in a web worker, WebSQL, and it's not in there. It actually used to be in there in Chrome, but they dropped it recently. I think they dropped it in like Chrome 42, and they also dropped it in Safari. So if you check out WebKit, this is another recent change. They used to support it, but they don't anymore. WebSQL in a web worker. Let's go. Right, open database is not defined. So, but IndexedDB you can use in every browser I just showed, except for some reason Safari didn't put it in a web worker. So, yeah, can't find variable IndexedDB. But in every other browser you can, and this will actually not block the DOM. So let's go back to Chrome. Let's do IndexedDB. Let's do web worker. Let's do 10,000, and Kirby is just not even missing a beat. Whereas if we did it outside of a web worker, IndexedDB, Kirby's stuck for a little while. So that's really cool, and it takes about the same amount of time to run it in a web worker as it does in the regular JS environment. This works in Chrome. It works in Firefox as well. So let's do Firefox, IndexedDB, web worker, insert. And as you can see, Kirby didn't skip at all. Yeah. Whereas in the normal environment, Kirby, yeah, he dropped a couple frames there. This also works in Edge, although sadly, the Couchdb test suite doesn't pass in Edge in a web worker. They have a concurrency bug that I filed on them they haven't fixed yet. But at least for this small isolated test, it does work in a web worker. Yeah. Actually, it looked like Kirby just dropped a little bit of a frame there. Let's try it again. No, maybe it was my imagination. Anyway, this totally works. And in Edge as well, it doesn't matter because, look, you can do it normally and he still doesn't skip. Well, I think he dropped a frame there. So luckily, in the two browsers where it really matters the most, in Firefox and Chrome, where IndexedDB does seem to be blocking the DOM for whatever reason, you can run IndexedDB in a web worker, which is nice. And I invite you to try out this thing, to really put it through its paces. It's fun to experiment with this stuff. You can try out some other popular databases in here as well. Let's go back to Firefox. So you can try out Loki, which is roughly about as performant as a regular in-memory object, which it should be, because it's in memory. So Loki's cool, right? It blocks the DOM, but unless you're doing really heavy stuff, you're probably not going to notice. So that's cool. You can try out Loki. Couchdb will use IndexedDB and then fall back to WebSQL only in Safari because Safari's implementation of IndexedDB was too buggy, so we just decided not to use it. Most people decided not to use it. So you can try out Couchdb, but what you're going to notice is that Couchdb has more or less the same performance characteristics as IndexedDB. Like if IndexedDB blocks, Couchdb is going to block too. Uh, oh gosh, this might take a while. Yeah, and sometimes when you're playing around with this stuff and you really want to be sure that you're comparing apples to apples and that it's everything is consistently happening, you should probably install some kind of browser extension that lets you just delete everything. Because I put in this little clear all button, but sometimes it doesn't work because sometimes, like, man, when you really test out IndexedDB and local storage and all this stuff, and you really like put it through heavy usage, you will see browsers do weird things. They will just throw errors and they will crash. And yeah, this will happen a lot. So anyway, I'm not even going to trust this clear all thing. I'm just gonna get out of this, and I'm just gonna put it on a different port and try it again. Yeah. So yeah, so you can go in here. You can try Couchdb. You'll notice Couchdb is quite a bit faster, or is more performant with regards to the DOM in a web worker. Couchdb does work entirely in a web worker. So yeah, that's cool. You can do all your Couchdb operations in a web worker. It's fine. See, Kirby's not having any problems at all. LocalStorage, sadly, I couldn't get it to work in a web worker, but you can test it out here in a normal environment. And of course, it's the same as index. I mean, it's using IndexedDB, so what can they do, right? There's nothing you can do, right? All these databases are bound by the underlying browser APIs, right? We have no way to work around that. Dexy is the same thing. Dexy is on top of IndexedDB, so Dexy is going to be slow too. Sadly, there it is, blocking Kirby. Dexy is really fast though. I like Dexy a lot. It's like the purest API to IndexedDB. It's pretty beautiful. Yeah, you can test out. What's more interesting? You can test out Couchdb in WebSQL in Chrome, and you can see how it blocks the DOM as well. Yeah, like not as bad as IndexedDB. Like if we try IndexedDB now, that was 3,400 milliseconds and it blocked the DOM the whole time. IndexedDB, yeah, 4,700 milliseconds and it blocked the DOM the whole time. Same deal with LocalStorage. Let's try WebSQL, blocking the DOM. LocalStorage over IndexedDB, blocking the DOM. Dexy, blocking the DOM. Yeah. Whereas in IE WebKit, you won't see this, thankfully. That actually is blocking the DOM a bit. That's interesting. Oh, God. Oh, man, I think, yeah. That is no bueno. Okay. Well, he seems to have gotten over whatever problems he was having there. Oh, man. That might be a bug on us. That might be a problem in Couchdb itself. I don't know. Or it could just be that, I don't know, Edge is running out of disk or something. I did manage to get it to crash earlier when I put in too much local storage. At least the DOM's responsive now, ish. Anyway, yeah, I encourage you to play around with these APIs and try this stuff out. File bugs on the browser vendors, they do listen, but take everything that's said with a grain of salt, because different databases have different performance characteristics in different browsers, and there are only a few things you can be sure of. You can be sure that if you can run something in a web worker, it will not block the DOM. That is a totally separate JavaScript environment, so that is preferable in a lot of cases. You can be sure that local storage will block the DOM, or it'll make Safari crash. So these are all things to take into consideration, and this is not information that you get if you just look at the raw performance numbers. How long does it take to insert blah 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 into such and such a database? Like that's one thing, but DOM blocking is a totally different thing, and arguably it's a more important thing, because if a database operation is long running, but let's see, look at that, it was 91 seconds. But if a DOM operation is long running, but it runs in the background and the user doesn't notice, and you're just taking care of stuff while they're still interacting with the page, then the user is going to perceive your app as being a lot faster. And ultimately, that's what we want. We want users to look at our app and say, that is a snappy app, right? So that's all I got. Thank you very much for watching, and have a beautiful day.